We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to this edition of the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, October 6th, 2024, as we record this new episode. The Major League Baseball postseason race is heating up as the Division Series round is underway. Some very spicy matchups, especially in the National League. That's been creating a lot of drama. That's good because it serves as a distraction from what we all witnessed in 2024 with the Chicago White Sox. In this episode, we'll share some of our favorite fun facts, quotes on surrounding fun facts, of the 2024 season on the heels of our James Fegan joining Fangraphs' Effectively Wild podcast. As we gear up for the upcoming offseason, we got some interesting arbitration projections from MLB Trade Rumors, which we use for the upcoming Sox Machine offseason plan projects. None bigger than Andrew Vaughn, which has created numerous debates on what the White Sox should do versus what they will do. Joining me in this episode is Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, gentlemen. Before we get into the show, our good friend Ted Mulvey on Sox Machine, the Sporkle Quizmaster, released the end of the season roster quiz. And there were 63 total players who played for the Chicago White Sox in 2024, which is an insane amount. And James, I have to applaud you. You beat me by 2 out of 63 players. James, you got 53. I got 51. Out of the 10 that you missed, James, which were the hardest players to remember that, hey, they did play for the White Sox?
First of all, I've talked to all these men personally, directly. I don't deserve praise for missing 10. This is an abomination. This is like mental decline documented. Like when they're trying to like take away my driver's license and they point to this, I'm like, well, that's a point in your favor for sure. Like it's bad. It's a bad score. I forgot Jonathan Cannon. I talk to Jonathan Cannon all the time. He's one of my favorite people to interview. One of my favorite pitchers to watch. One of the best development stories of the season. 23 starts. It has it next to his name. Forgot it. Didn't put him in there. So I could take my pick of like things I missed. I got Jake Woodford, which I was very proud of.
See, that's the one I spent 5 minutes trying to remember who made 2 random starts with the White Sox.
Yeah, because I didn't feel like it was a team that had like the guy comes up for 2 starts type of. They weren't like picking up guys for like spot starts to like keep us in the playoff race or anything like that.
Right.
There's usually either like a AAA call-up who stays in the system, or someone who has to really who moves to the bullpen and like throws Chad Cool type outings, or Jared Schuster, literally Jared Schuster. So I think maybe this is like a overly clever answer, but I did miss Clevenger And I think it's understandable to miss Clevenger, talking about people I talk to, like not someone I talk to the most for sure. And not someone I would associate like heavily with this season. He only had 4 outings. He was gone from the clubhouse after his season-ending surgery, and that was early August. So like the last, thinking about like just visualizing myself in the room for like the last 2 months of the season, he doesn't come to mind, and he obviously wasn't there for the first couple of months of the season, so he just wasn't a physical presence in the locker room very often. And the starts that he did make, most of them were like, one of them was on the road, but I think he was in Tampa, and there were a lot of them like they weren't fully built up, or he wasn't fully stamina wise. As much as like the story of them bringing him back was like a 2024 story and a Chris Getz decision, and something that like you tilt your eyebrow about, because it winds up being one kind of this unnecessary PR storm they chose to weather again. And while I got at the time, like they needed innings, like, that Chris Flexen made 30 starts, like the rotation wasn't bulletproof, but doing anything you can do to get innings wasn't really like the story of this team, so to speak. And he just never really got going in some way where you really considered his presence or performance in the season at all. So he was forgettable, and I forgot him. Feel better about forgetting that one than others. Pretty much all of them. So I would say that was the one that was easily forgotten, because it just felt like not something that really became a 2024 story in the way players normally become memorable.
So, Jim, did you beat us? You did better than 51 or 53?
I did, but it probably deserves an asterisk because I got to it late, and I had some answers jogged in my memory probably by the Veterans Committee chat. I put it on mute at one point because I realized like this is spoiling it. Like Zach Remillard probably wouldn't have remembered just because like he wasn't in front of mind. And
I forgot Remillard.
Okay. Yeah, so I probably would have forgotten him. I did get all the position players, though, because of that. Like, I basically went, what was the opening day roster? Serial order effect. What was the opening day roster? What was the roster at the end of the season? And then try to fill in the gaps with, like, go through the transactions and such. And that got me most of the way there. The guy that I kick myself most for missing was Davy Garcia. That was 14 appearances. I was thinking, like, I should know this. And just, early enough in the season, so many other relievers came and went, but I did see him pitch a couple times in Charlotte, so I figured like that should have caught my memory. But I guess at that point, he was not faring well in Charlotte, so I just figured like, oh, he's not part of the plans. Like he's not going to be a Jordan Leisure. Like might be back in the bullpen. Let's keep track of him. And so yeah, that was one that the guy with the most appearances that slipped through my brain, whereas like Brad Keller and Brian Shaw felt like guys from different seasons.
Yep, I missed out on both of those. I still don't remember when Shaw pitched for the White Sox.
Yep,
like
same.
When I missed Keller, okay, yes, I remember that. He pitched in the Cubs series, I believe, but I still don't remember when Shaw pitched for the White Sox. Was that April?
He made the opening day roster.
Yep.
So he got walked off in Cleveland, and I think that was his swan song. Basically, as a major leaguer up to this point.
Wow.
But yeah, he didn't have a great
All
spring,
right.
but they were wanting to carry him for veteran presence. Davey, I saw him in Charlotte when I went to in August. I was like, oh yeah, hey, a little bit. He had like a 2-inning save to protect a 1-run lead like earlier in the season, and that was very much when I thought like they're not going to break the record. If random stuff like that can happen, they're going to find 45 wins under couch cushions if like you can hold down eventually a playoff eligible team for 2 innings and protect the lead. Like they'll be fine. Those teams don't lose 121 games like that doesn't happen.
The ones that I'm embarrassed, I totally spaced out on Jordan Leisure and Gus Varland, even though both of them were racking up appearances. I was running up against the clock because trying to remember who made 2 random starts. That's where I got Clevenger. Because I'm like, oh yeah, Mike Clevenger, he made 2 starts. No, he made 4. It's like, crap, I still don't know the random guy that made 2 starts. I totally forgot about Robbie Grossman, Kevin Pillar, and Rafael Ortega. Like, Jim, you said you got all the position players. I completely spaced out that Ortega was with the White Sox for a couple weeks.
Yeah, there are a couple guys who I filed away in my brain as far as like remember them for the Sporkle quiz at the end of the year. Like Jake Woodford was one, like, oh, he's like the Odrisamer or Despaigne of the 2024 White Sox. Like, just kind of like, let's throw him against the wall. Like, no, this isn't working out. See ya. And Ortega was the same thing on the position player side. Did see him in Charlotte, so I remember him from there as well. Pilar was another one I think I might have forgotten if it weren't for the chat. I think he popped up in the chat. And so like that was a case where, not going to forget him now. Even though like, maybe I would have remembered him. Like I feel more confident I would have remembered him than Remillard just because of like, I enjoyed picturing Chris Getz trying to deter or prevent Pilar from reaching 10 years of service time, just like some kind of personal grudge. And so I think that probably would have popped in my brain, but, it's a name where before I sat down for the quiz thinking like, oh yeah, I might have forgotten him.
Well, if you still haven't participated, we've given you a few clues of the toughest ones to remember, but you still can go to soxmachine.com. You can participate. Again, it is 63 players you have to remember that played for the White Sox in 2024, even though James gives himself a hard time. 53 out of 63, 51 out of 63. Those are still pretty good scores. I mean, remembering more than 50 guys who have played for the White Sox this season is impressive. At least I think so. So, James, don't beat yourself up too much.
I will say I would have missed Gus Varland probably if he didn't pitch in the last game of the year, because every time he was on the mound, I was like, oh, yeah, Gus Varland.
Who is this guy?
Like, I didn't like recognize his face. Like every time I saw him on the mound, like popped up on the mound, they do the, they introduce him, and like it took, 2 seconds, whereas every other pitcher it takes me like 0.2 seconds to be like, oh, I know that's Daniel De Los Santos. Even for somebody who just popped in the end of the year for whatever reason, like Varland is just like Gus, and ended up being right. But it was just I do process of elimination more than that's Gus Varland.
Well, Gus Varland's walkout music, Jim, is "Money for Nothing" by Dire Straits. So that's something that, like, in my mind, because I like that song, and I'm a big Dire Straits fan. I'm like, oh, this is new. You don't usually hear pitchers walk out. It's all about that drum solo at the beginning.
Cease walked out to some last year.
What did he walk out to?
Cease did a couple different things, but he was walking out to Dire Straits for a good portion. I don't know if it was last year or 2022, but definitely a little bit, because we asked him about it a little bit, and it's like Dylan Cease, like, yeah, it's a good song. It's like Crochet was walking out to Rooster, which was like Rodon's walkout song, and I said like, oh, is this an homage to Rodon? And Garrett was like, did he walk out to this? And I was like, you were on the team all season. Like later in the year, someone was asking Garrett about it, and he's just like, and I was like, right. It was like the three of us basically like staring at each other like in the clubhouse. He's like, yeah, I basically just Googled like cool walkout songs, and I was there. He's like, someone asked me some like brutal question early in the year about whether I was like dedicating it to Rodon. I was like, Garrett, that was me. He's like, oh man, my bad. So yeah, I thought it was really important to have a big feature talking to Garrett at the end of the season.
I think you're going to miss him the most, James, when he gets traded in the offseason.
A lot.
His next stop will say, yeah, I talked to Scott Merkin about my best inning in the majors. I think it was Merck.
Well, again, you could play. Maybe that'll be a future Sporkle quiz idea for Ted. Name the walk-up songs or the walkout songs for the hitters and pitchers. That would be a special treat for those that attend home games, because that's usually when the only time you get a chance to hear them.
Traveling to see your fave sports team is cool, but traveling with Amex Platinum for the big game is even better.
Right this way.
With access to dedicated card member entrances at select events, you can skip the line. And with access to the Centurion Lounge,
he shoots a three.
You can catch the next game on the way home. That's the powerful backing of American Express. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/withAmex. Card member entrance access not limited to Amex Platinum Card.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Also, earlier last week, James got a chance to join the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs. Of course, everybody knows the Effectively Wild podcast. And you had some stars within the baseball media world, James, pitching you some quote-unquote fun facts of the 2024 season, which were incredibly impressive, like the White Sox having the worst division record of all time since divisions were created in baseball. The American League Central combined was still below 500, even though 4 teams were above 500 in 2024, were some of my favorites. But I thought, Jim, we could pitch some of our favorite fun facts to James as well. Now, James in the Effectively Wild podcast, I highly recommend that you listen to it because it's just hilarious for those that didn't follow the White Sox every single day. Try to pitch these fun facts to James, and James giving out grades of the OPS from White Sox hitters based on how strong that they were, which is funny in its own right because nobody had an OPS above 700 that qualified for the hitting title, and only 2 White Sox position players actually did qualify for the hitting title, so that was a fun fact. But you don't have to grade these, James. I just figured that these were pretty interesting to me. So, Jim, I'm going to start with days of the week. So I broke down the White Sox record by the day of the week. The White Sox were 2-18 this year on Monday games. They didn't win their first Monday game until August 12th against the New York Yankees, that wild 12-2 victory. And then on Sunday, the White Sox were 4-21. At one point, Jim, and this is important, podcast listeners, because we record this podcast Sunday nights, the White Sox lost 16 consecutive Sunday games from May 12th through September 1st. So, Jim, almost 4 straight months, we recorded the Monday podcast episode coming off a White Sox loss.
And does that mean James made his score appearances after a White Sox loss as well?
Pretty much.
I mean, it was the tone of those appearances, even if it wasn't the news hook. So just as well.
But yeah, it squares up just because they went so long without winning a series. They went so long without winning a road series. They only won 2 of those all year. That, yeah, I mean, like it makes sense that if there was a rubber match, and there often wasn't one, like they lost the series by the time Sunday rolled around, like, yeah, they often needed to win that and didn't.
The Monday thing also scans because I think they lost like the first game of the series, like the impeccably like long streak as well. And it also seems like a byproduct of, you know, teams being like, all right, we got to take this seriously. This is an MLB team. And they come out and boat race them the first game. And then maybe when they take their foot all the way off the gas is in the second or third game is when there's a real opportunity for, actual competition.
The White Sox scored 59 runs in Monday games. They allowed 118. So they allowed twice as many runs than they scored on Monday games. The White Sox did not like Mondays. The best days of the week for the White Sox were Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturdays. They were only 10 games below 500 on those days. And Wednesdays were crazy. 5 Wednesday games this year ended in walk-offs for the White Sox. Either them walking off the opponent or the opponent walking off on the White Sox. So typically those games are pretty close. Jimmy, you got a fun fact that's on the top of your mind before I just continue down the list of fun facts?
Yeah, when it comes to the White Sox position player side, which I think is where most of the fun facts can be found, for the first 123 years that the White Sox have been in existence, they've always had one player who's been at least worth 1.5 wins above replacement on the position player side. Like even in strike shortened seasons, half seasons, etc., the worst seasons in franchise history up to this point, they've had one. In 2024, they did not. Luis Robert Jr., 1.4 wins above replacement. Last year was one of only 2 seasons where they had one player only with with more than 1.5 wins above replacement. So the only two times it's happened in franchise history where they've had one was 2013 with Lexi Ramirez and 2023 with Luis Robert Jr. So that's a troubling trend that they've just, this isn't a new problem. This isn't a sudden, what the hell happened? Everybody got hurt. This is a case where last year there were plenty of warning signs, and then just Chris Getz could not do anything about it. Maybe if Tommy Pham's there the whole year, or maybe, if Paul DeYoung's there the whole year, they get there. So you can maybe put, not quite an asterisk, because even, they traded guys away in 2013 and they still got one. They traded guys away in 2023, still got one. So, usually in the White Sox very prolonged history of having bad offenses and guys that couldn't hit, and they took forever to have a 30 homer guy, on and on and on. They usually had at least defensive specialists who got there solely on the strength of playing good defense in a middle infield position. Even that wasn't going for them. So basically, like they really dropped the ball in all regards. And the fact that they had a warning sign last year and either didn't heed it or couldn't heed it, et cetera, is pretty troubling.
James, do you have a fun fact from this season that you wanted to share?
I've cobbled one together in the last minute here. What do Miguel Vargas, Braden Shoemake, Chucky Robinson, Nick Senzel, and Rafael Ortega all have in common?
All at least
no RBIs.
They all have lower OPSs than Martin Maldonado, and also none of them have been in my kitchen.
Wow! Oh man! Oh Miguel! Oh Miguel! I mean, Nick Senzel's probably never playing the majors again. Probably a lot of those guys are, except for Miguel Vargas, are going to play in the majors again. Yikes. Yikes. Some other random fun facts. The White Sox only scored a run in the first inning 21% of the time. That wasn't the worst in Major League Baseball. That was the second worst. If you wanted to watch the White Sox score a run, your best chance was watching the fourth inning, as they scored 0.43 runs every fourth inning. That was their highest mark of the season out of all the innings. If you didn't want to watch the White Sox allow a run, their best inning run prevention-wise was the sixth inning. And they were the top 10 in Major League Baseball, only allowing 0.46 runs in the sixth inning this season. And then some other random tidbits. The White Sox, for those that bet, were a road favorite only one game this season. So 80 times they were the underdog, one time they were the favorite. And of course, they blew a 3-0 lead in Miami on July 6th. That's the only time the White Sox were favored on the road. And the White Sox this year were 20-29 when their starting pitcher had a quality start. We talked about this at a podcast a couple months ago. But this is the one that boggles my mind, James. The White Sox this season were 16-15 when their starting pitcher allowed one earned run or fewer. And I'm thinking here, hey, that's an above 500 record. But the White Sox lost 15 games this season when the starting pitcher only allowed one earned run or none. And that is a bit shocking because the Kansas City Royals this year, to compare, were 41-7 in such games.
Yeah, that's kind of like being really excited that you hit like 220 when on a 3-0 count type of figure.
Jim, do you have any other fun facts?
Yeah, when it comes to two favorite stats of the analyst set, pitcher wins and RBIs, like obviously, we know that they don't have a whole lot of meaning when it comes to like a player's worth, but to me, it does indicate something about how many enjoyable moments a player was involved in. Like if a pitcher lucks into 12 wins, like you probably had a decent time watching the start, or the games happen to be, he put the team in a position to win, or they had great games around him. And so you associate him with good times. Whereas like with, John Danks and Jose Quintana, like they were above average pitchers, but a lot of fans didn't like them because they just, Danks would give up a run in the sixth inning that would take him out of the wins column. The Jose Quintana got no run support and just had to kind of shrug it away. And so like, it does point to, I think, like how enjoyable something was for a player. Same thing, the RBIs, like you can have a bad 100 RBI season, but it usually means you were either on a great offense and doing something right, where, you know, you're hitting sacrifice flies, you're hitting productive outs, you're just getting a ton of chances. Either way, you're probably in a situation where people are having fun. So I look at the number of winless pitchers on the team. The White Sox had 18 pitchers who appeared without a win. They never had more than 12 before 2023. So like last 2 years, they had 14, although that counts Hanser Alberto, so that counts like Danny Mendick as well in the position player side. So 17 and 13, but still. And then you had Mike Soroka going 0-10, which was a first for pitcher having 10 losses without a win since I think the 1983 Twins had a guy whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. But so that points to, I think, just how, widespread the dissatisfaction was. It wasn't like one pitcher who was either dropping the ball or beset with bad luck. A whole bunch of guys were. And so there's that. On the offensive side, I thought maybe somewhere along the line in the 1980s, somebody would have had more than or fewer than 70 RBIs to lead the team with, but that didn't happen. So you have to go back to 1968, year of the pitcher, to have a White Sox team that didn't have somebody who drove in more than 70 runs. So, and this is why I think it was important for me that the White Sox reached 121 losses, so you could call them the losingest team of all time, period, end of sentence, versus having qualifiers, because whenever you mention 1968, you have to say year of the pitcher and hope people understand what it means, or talk about the mounds being raised and offensive levels being at historic lows across the league. Means a lot to some people when you say 1968. Oh yeah, no offense, but it's not quite as clear to the casual baseball fan or somebody who wasn't around.
A lot of those national guys that went to Detroit to watch the White Sox break the barrier, the 120 loss barrier. They needed the White Sox to lose at least one more game, because then it would have wrecked their stories. Did Sam Anderson make it to Detroit, James?
He did. Sam Anderson was there. Jesse Rogers was there.
Then they all left on Friday, after Friday's game.
Yeah, I think Jesse Rogers was like, he was pressed because he was trying to cover Hendricks' last start the next day. So I think he drove home like immediately after that game ended in Detroit.
Wow.
So that was rough. We bid Sam adieu after that night as well. I wouldn't say either one of them were the culprit I'm thinking of, but I would say I've never you hear about no cheering in the press box. I don't know if I've heard that rule is flagrantly violated, as I said was, as the White Sox were holding off the Angels for 3 straight nights, in front of a bunch of national reporters in disbelief and horror. As just hearing just me flicking along another random day, like transcribing and hearing people like reschedule their flights frantically in the press box behind me. It was I don't know, an amusing moment the White Sox were kind enough to give us all at the end of the season.
Yeah, you always hear we root for the story, and that was a case of the story getting cheers and boos.
It's basically like the Angels were like not good, so like it was kind of like a lot of rage against like poor relays being carried out that broke the game open.
I'm still angry at the Angels. But that's what I have for fun facts this season. Again, fun facts in quotes. It wasn't obviously a very fun season for the Chicago White Sox, but we could at least try and attempt to move forward as we start with the White Sox off season, with the MLB postseason underway, which will chime in with our thoughts on how things are going in the division series in a moment here. But the off-season plan projects are coming up for Sox Machine after the World Series is over. And thanks to our friends over at MLB Trade Rumors, they released their arbitration projections, which Jim wrote about last week on SoxMachine.com, and you can see the numbers. We're going to chime in here because the White Sox have a total of 9 players that are arbitration eligible. Chris Flexen had it in his contract that he would be declared a free agent after the 2024 season. So if you may recall in previous podcast episodes, I misspoke. I was incorrect. Even though any team that signs Chris Flexen, there is the opportunity, if Flexen agreed, to be part of the arbitration process. But he hasn't written his contract to not be, so he's just straight up a free agent. So if you want to bring back Chris Flexen, he's a free agent. You can pick whatever dollar amount to bring back Chris Flexen. But out of all the arbitration projections, like Matt Foster, $900,000, Steven Wilson, $1 million, Justin Anderson, my guy, $1.1 million, Jimmy Lambert, $1.2 million, De Los Santos, $1.7 million, Garrett Crochet, $2.9 million, Nicky Lopez, $5.1 million. You're probably thinking these are a lot of easy decisions. The White Sox should not tender these guys at all. But except for Garrett Crochet at $2.9 million, you're going to probably tender him, and some of you may want to keep him, some of you may want to trade him. But then you got Gavin Sheets at $2.6 million and Andrew Vaughn at $6.4 million. And this sparks the conversation, and I think, especially in the Sox Machine comments, where there's been a lot of people talking past each other, between what you would do if you were in charge of the White Sox versus trying to guess at what the White Sox are actually going to do. Because if MLB Trade Rumors are right, and the agents for Vaughn and Sheets decide to go with these numbers, and the White Sox, let's say, hypothetically, agree to these numbers, that's $9 million tied it up in a payroll for two guys that are going to be your DH and first baseman, because they should not be in the outfield any longer. And they provide below league average production, especially at first base and especially at DH. So what should the White Sox do? And Jim, I know you wrote about this. It is a very curious case with the guy at the top, with Andrew Vaughn at $6.4 million. After writing that column in Sox Machine, and now we're 4 or 5 days after that column, how are you feeling about this decision for the Chicago White Sox? And you're thinking of what they should do about Vaughn.
It's a very funny situation because it's one of those perfect sweet spots where you get responses to it, whether it's on Sox Machine, whether it's in the Twitter responses when you share the article. Both sides being very confident that their answer is correct. Like there's people saying, oh, he's one of the few good hitters they have,
yes,
a few average hitters they have. Why wouldn't they bring him back? Nobody's taking away his playing time. They don't have any first baseman really knocking down the door. I don't believe in Tim Elko. So of course, just one more year, see if he puts it together. And then you have the other side saying like, he's getting slightly worse while his number is going up. He was barely adequate for earning $3 million last year. So why bring him back? Turn it over. And just had extreme confidence on both sides to where I think it lays out the case on both sides. To me, you really have a high burden of proof if you're a right-handed first baseman that you have to hit, just because it is a position where you can throw guys in order to get playing time. And the White Sox have a number of right-handed hitters. Brian Ramos and Miguel Vargas were sharing duties at third base last year. And, whether you believe in Vargas or not, Ramos or not, I would say, like, if you believe in Vargas at all, Ramos at this point in his career, because, Ramos has a little less, a lot less experience in the majors, that, you could just sidestep that debate altogether by having one of those guys play first base or rotating them in and out, having them pick up a glove, kind of like Yasmani Grandal played first base here and there. Like the learning curve isn't terribly high if you have corner infield skills. So there's that. Also, if Tim Elko, the doubts are real about his, in zone contact rates and whether just, you're asking way too much for him to, fare well against major league hitters. But in the event he, makes himself worthy of an audition, even if it's like Andy Wilkins shaped in terms of probably triple A's, or a quadruple A to the core, but may as well. It's another case where you can just explore that and put the question to rest once and for all. Gavin Sheets is almost the one that's, more compelling to keep, if only because he's left-handed. And so he's somebody who you can throw in there and not feel bad about like having Ramos or Vargas face every difficult righty. If you believe in the clubhouse mix, if you believe in like having somebody who can speak for other players, like Sheets as well, versed in having to be a point person for the position players and talking about how much it sucks to be them. And, maybe that there's some value in having that, especially in the first half of the season. So like, that's kind of how I look at it. But, given that Vaughn is the third overall pick, there's a lot of emotions invested in him. He has represented himself well, even if you're not impressed by the numbers, like doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with him as a person, him with the way he's conducted himself. Just, it's a matter of just like maybe not having the physical skills to be an above average hitter in the major leagues that, he's falling short, but that's kind of how I see it.
James, do you have any insight, or let's say you're the Spider-Man of the White Sox clubhouse, your White Sox spidey senses on how the White Sox could approach this decision with Andrew Vaughn?
I thought you were going to say James was like stuck on the ceiling and nobody was looking up.
Not like he's valued like for clubhouse personality. They've certainly talked about expecting a breakout from him in the past. They certainly think like he righted the ship after like a really awful start to some degree. But I don't know how you see him and not think like this is stagnated. I think the idea that we would see Vaughn, either it's next year or even 3 years from now in another organization, or two organizations from now, like putting up kind of a couple random good years, I don't think that would shock anyone. Like as I'm like looking at free agent first base options, and so like, man, if only the Orioles like declined Ryan O'Hearn's club option, that would really be something enticing. But like obviously that's somebody who got passed around more than once from different organizations, and you can see Vaughn like certainly doing a little bit better than that down the road. But it seems like a change of scenery at some point is what's going to happen if he's going to do better than what he has. I just think it's probably a pretty big figure for a team that's like slashing payroll to commit to something that doesn't seem to have a lot of upside. Really ties up the roster in a way where they could commit people to it. Lennon Sosa looked pretty good defensively at first base. That didn't look stretched there.
Another case, another righty.
Another righty. So yeah, I don't have like a big indicator like they're totally out on him, like the way like, I could tell you like they're probably going to decline Jimmy Lambert's figure because he's got shoulder surgery and he won't be ready, like, or it'd be like kind of touch and go for whether he'd be ready, and you wouldn't commit guaranteed money or over seven figures to somebody you wouldn't know could help your bullpen or what it'll look like after injury. Like I don't have that sort of like clarity, but it just seems like it's really it would be about some sort of continuity, whether it's like knowing somebody who's going to be capable or at least decent in the middle of the order, somebody who's kind of like would help either a new administration transition or just ease a transition with have some buy-in with Grady if that's who they retain with like a new players they bring in, and he would be part of that. Even though Gavin is more vocal and probably a better quote, I think Vaughn fills a similar role where they're kind of mentioned in the same breath a lot in terms of internal clubhouse leadership. I don't know if they're like a package deal or anything like that, but it just seems like they're both really on the border of it's not an awful value. It's not like an albatross, but it's kind of tying up commitment to something that seems like the past. And are you ready to really commit to a new step forward? Are you do they feel really passionate about a flyer on the market? Do they really think like, does Anthony Rizzo want to have his twilight on the south side? Something like that. Like, or if, I don't know, if they're just sorting the KBO like leaderboards and then making calls to agent.
Matt Davidson.
So yeah, I think it's really in the middle, and it kind of speaks to like what how much they're really trying to turn over the roster, which you'd argue a lot after last year, but at the same time, Getz has already kind of foreshadowed a not big turnover in terms of it. I don't think Vaughn and Sheets are really who you think about saying like we need to see better to get to where we're going to go in 2-3 years. It'd really just be like kind of hoping they're a little bit better next season. But it's really hard to see how you justify keeping both of them and really tying and locking up that position the way you have, especially with kind of the way they've moved away from using either one in the outfield. Are you really just going to block out the first base DH rotation from a lot of guys, not a lot of guys, but some guys that need the at bats at the major league level, especially with Vargas out of options and really not much place to put him? How are you really going to use Ramos at all, or really anyone else you call up from the AAA short of Colson, without leaving that space open for guys to get at bats there? And I think that's trickier. How do you get Caro hitting every day if you're not catching him every day, which I don't think you would if you don't have the DH spot open. So I think pick one would be kind of my message of what they have to do.
Yeah, with Vaughn, like I was looking at his numbers because he did have the terrible start. And so I looked at him from June onwards just to see, like, if you set aside those 2 months as a complete anomaly, because, as unimpressive as he's been, throughout his career, he was not, somebody you feel like you have to option or DFA at some point in the season, which he was, like when he was batting under 200 for 2 months, that it was very much a case of, how long can he be on this roster in the state that he's in? You look at the last 4 months, 95 games, 70-66 OPS, 271, 316 OBP, 450 slugging. And that's kind of what, to me, is what keeps me from like buying into Vaughn at the number, is just his hot streaks were never that hot. We saw Abreu when he would get on a heater, like the 4-digit OPS and, 7 homers in 10 games, that sort of thing. Whereas Vaughn just, it's a lot of singles, some doubles, the occasional homer, like he'll hit like 2 in a week. And it's like, wow, he's pummeling the ball right now. And it just, for a first baseman, I think you need to see more than like 450 slugging and a 766 OPS being his career high. And you look at that same for a first baseman and, with a quite a body of work. So I think that's what keeps me from, re-upping, is just the upside throughout his career has never been there. And like, to the extent that we get excited about him as a, hitter who could, maybe transform a lineup, it's very much relative to his own career versus like the standards of excellence for a bat first position.
And he doesn't walk. Like, even the month by month breakdown at Fangraphs, because you mentioned from June 1st onward, like June was his best month, where Vaughn had a 933 OPS, 3.8% walk rate. So that was fueled by a 360 BAPIP.
They drew, they came up, more later in the year, the walks. He drew 23 over 95 games, which is not terrible for a White Sox player. Like, it's a case of very much.
It's not terrible for a White Sox player.
Like, you always have to, like, 23 walks. It's double digits. That's something. That's how.
But it's god awful compared to the rest of Major League Baseball.
I think that's been the biggest disappointment for Vaughn, is just like the walk rates. Like, I expected him to be like, even if he didn't hit for power, and like having seen a lot of his opposite field drives end up on the warning track, I do wonder about like length of levers being a problem just for generating the kind of natural power that you see like Eloy Jimenez hit opposite field homers by accident. Like, Vaughn's opposite field homers are very much purposeful because you had to put a charge into one to get the ball out to right field. Like, I thought, okay, you might be seeing some of the real ramifications of having a 5'10" power hitter, is just, that you need to have everything lined up to get the momentum going in the right direction to get the ball out of the park. So maybe he's not going to hit 30 homers, but for the walks to never materialize and for him to fit in with a very walk deprived team, when during his Cal days, that was supposed to be his calling card, was just a, really strong batting eye and being able to really have a good judge of the edges of the plate and not be susceptible to sliders the way college hitters are. Like, that's, I think, what's most disappointing to me.
So I guess the verdict for the White Sox after the season, when it comes to Vaughn or Sheets, I'm with you, James. It has to be one or the other. I think a lot of our podcast listeners right now are screaming at us. It has to be neither. But this kind of goes into guessing in what the White Sox are going to do, right? There's a debate of what the White Sox should do. What they should do, not tender either of them.
Fair point.
Churn.
And James brought it up. You have your first baseman battle. Whoever doesn't win third base between Ramos, Vargas, and Sosa, one of you put on a first baseman glove and pretend to play first base. Because when you look at Baseball Savant and outs above average and range and success rate, Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn are bad first basemen defensively. So not only are they below league average production-wise at first base, they're also poor defensive first basemen. So it raises the question, what in the hell are we doing here? White Sox with Vaughn and Sheets. So what they should do is non-tender, and they should just move on. What they are going to do, though, I have this gut feeling, they're totally picking up, and they will tender a contract to Andrew Vaughn. Gavin Sheets, I'm not entirely sure about yet. I will hate it if they bring back both of them. I will make that clear. I will hate it. I will dislike that decision by the White Sox. But in my gut, I say there's a better than 95% chance that one of them's coming back. And if I had to be a betting man, which I am, I would say my money's on Andrew Vaughn coming back and Gavin Sheets being let go. With the White Sox hoping that Vaughn could play more than 140 games and hit more than 20 homers.
Who wants to accept significantly less or $500,000 less than that projected figure? That'll be who comes back.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, 5.5 for Vaughn. What's that phrase? It's the file and trial. We file at $5.5 million. You either accept it or we see you in arbitration. And I don't know. I don't know if Vaughn or Sheets want to go to that court case.
Yeah, to me, like $5 million is what Carlos Santana signed for, like $5.2 million, and that's the. I think above that is where you get to, like, that's a serious amount of money. Like, Rowdy Tellez, another guy who made $3 million, and like those are kind of the first baseman you sign for 1 year. CJ Cron used to be the standard bearer for. Could do worse at first base. You think he can do better, but he could do worse if you want 20 or 30 homers. Like, he's your man. And so we'll see who's going to be that guy. Maybe it's Vaughn. Maybe he has that successful career of just bouncing around the Lyle Overbay to bring him back. The guy who, if you have him as your first baseman, you weren't excited, but also like you've seen worse. And that Vaughn might be that kind of roaming the league, playing for 5 teams in 6 years and doing okay, but team's always looking for an upgrade over him.
So that's what to ponder next for the White Sox while we hear loose rumors on who could be possibly interviewed by the White Sox. The Athletic's Keith Law, one of his chats, mentioned the Whites or Buck Showalter in the grapevine of MLB gossip and rumors, perhaps showing some interest in the job to be the next White Sox manager. I don't think that's a great idea, especially with Showalter just kind of recently. Especially, you could see this on Awful announcing, dunking on sabermetrics when Jerry Reinsdorf, in his long letter saying that the White Sox are going to beef up their analytics department, doesn't seem like the right direction for the White Sox. That would also be a very odd pairing because the White Sox are not good enough to take advantage of Showalter's strengths as a manager, and he has been successful. But until we get more gossip, we'll address that in future episodes of the podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the new Prologue EV, there's a lot that could impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Let's talk about things that are exciting. The MLB postseason has been very entertaining. And I want to start out West first because as we are recording this, game 2 between the Padres and Dodgers is wrapping up. And before we started recording, James was scaring me because you were telling me, James, that the Dodgers may have to forfeit because the fans were throwing trash on the field. And then after that stoppage in time, the Padres responded by just blasting home runs all over the ballpark. The Padres hit 6 home runs in game 2 against the Dodgers. And as we're recording this, the Padres are up 10-2 over the Dodgers in the 9th inning. So I'll try to drag it out as long as possible to see if the Padres do win. But I do have a question, though, regarding just the Padres and Dodgers, James. Is this the best rivalry right now in Major League Baseball?
I think it's like the best rivalry amongst like two teams I think could legitimately like win the World Series. Probably a bit higher on the Padres. Recency bias in full effect from watching this game. Seems like forfeiting would have been the more dignified way for the Dodgers to go out this night.
What's the forfeit? 9-1 if you forfit? Is that the final
I don't
score?
know.
That was 9-0.
It still wouldn't be the
9-0.
visuals of seeing
Okay.
6 home runs go out of the stadium. I think, obviously the Braves are eliminated, but them and the Phillies is plenty of juice. I enjoyed just the didn't wind up being a very good game, but the first game, the division series looking like an AL Central getaway day game between the Tigers and Guardians, but just with extremely high stakes for some reason. It felt like turning on MLB TV in the middle of an afternoon while home. So it was really just, but yeah, I think there's definitely a case for it, especially because like I think both teams, the rivalry has a lot of meaning, but like success for either one is not just knocking the other one off. It's like supremacy. So like two teams that kind of both the rivalry is a lot and they kind of are trying to like load up to fight each other, but also it's like just supposed to be a stepping stone to winning it all. It's pretty cool. Whereas it seems like some years like the Phillies kind of like when they made that run, like they're on house money the whole time. I don't think losing the World Series is like a disappointment. Whereas like the Braves, that was a loaded up team, and now it's the Braves couldn't really get their act together like the whole season, and the Phillies looking at a juggernaut, but now they're kind of barely holding on their playoff series a little bit. So yeah, I could get down with that. White Sox versus Angels look like it has a lot of juice going forward, so excited to see future showdowns in that respect. We'll see if it can match up. Very, very similar franchises in a lot of respects, so strength against strength. Let's see.
Yeah, there's a lot of electricity. Dodgers sell out constantly. The Padres are on this incredible streak of sellouts as well. Just the crowd interactions when either team's
A lot of
at
violence.
home. Yeah, it could get violent. It could get violent.
Like, very underrated because I've been to the only time I've been to Petco was during a Dodgers Padres game. And that was during an unimpressive Padres season. I remember it for Clayton Kershaw pitching 7 shutout innings and Yasiel Puig hitting like a 460 something foot homer over the batter's eye at Petco, being like the most impressive homer I've seen in person. But very much like Dodgers fans feeling very comfortable at Petco, calling it Dodger Stadium South or whatever. And, fans getting upset, but not really having the standing to maybe back upwards or feeling sufficiently motivated by the quality of their team to throw fists. But now that the Padres are, legitimately good, but also like the Dodgers have a little bit of a, kind of like the second Death Star almost, like they feel very under construction for a team that's supposed to be as good as they are, especially like the last couple of years, their pitching staff, like, when they had to rely on Lance Lynn last year to a surprising degree, like, and now Kershaw's
Right.
out with a toe injury. Like they always have some weird stuff going on at the rotation to where they feel gettable for as good as they've been. Where the Padres feel like, I think, they should be able to win. They should be the favorites, even though they did not win the division. And I think you'll see, fans backing up the confidence with some confidence of their own. And You saw trash being thrown on the field at Dodger Stadium at the Padres players. The violence of West Coast baseball fans, I think, is very underrated. We hear a lot about East Coast Yankees, Red Sox, Mets, Phillies, being very inhospitable to traveling fans. But out west, if you're in the line of a rivalry, you can see some gnarly stuff.
Yeah, Giants Dodgers, that's a big rivalry. But I think in Major League Baseball, Padres Dodgers, and now that series being tied 1-1. We dragged it out long enough for the Padres to win game 2, 10-2. They're near each other. It does not take a long drive to get from Los Angeles to San Diego. It feels long because you're standing in traffic more than half the time as far as the duration getting to the two cities. But now they travel 2 hours south, drive-wise, to San Diego in games 3 and 4. And the Dodgers, the Padres knocked the Dodgers out last time that they faced in the postseason. If the Dodgers lose games 3 and 4 in San Diego, it is totally possible with how well San Diego plays at home, especially in front of that raucous crowd and the way that Fernando Tatis Jr. just absolutely loves hitting against anyone that pitches in a Dodgers uniform. I think that's my favorite rivalry in Major League Baseball right now is Dodgers-Padres, but a serious one. And I don't know about this New York Mets team, but they, I think, are the story of the postseason right now because they are a very dramatic team, James. So they lose game 2 against the Milwaukee Brewers, allowing 2 home runs in the 8th inning. But then they win game 3 against the Brewers thanks to Pete Alonso's big home run in the 9th inning. They're shut out for 7 innings against Zach Wheeler, who only allows 1 hit, just completely dominates the Mets hitters. But then the Mets score 5 runs in the 8th inning to steal game 1. Philadelphia is in self-destruction mode, especially in sports radio. Only to see the Phillies, after being down 3-0, tie the game thanks to huge home runs by Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos. And then eventually the game still tied 6-6 because the Mets refused to die. Castellanos finally winning the game with a walk-off single in the 9th inning. Suddenly, James, the New York Mets are now must-see TV in the postseason. Like, you cannot walk away during a Mets postseason game right now because you're going to miss something big. And maybe this started all the way back with a crazy doubleheader against the Atlanta Braves just to make the playoffs.
The thing that I most enjoyed was obviously the Brewers round didn't become like the big story of the game because the way the inning finished, but like to see Jose Quintana out there at what is he, age 35 at this point, pitching 6 scoreless. Greatest Colombian pitcher of all time, prove me wrong. To see him kind of still doing his thing, still, kind of working 92, 93 when he's feeling good and being just as effective as it feels like he was, 10 years ago. I only 70% joking, but texted my friend Saadav, covers the Cubs of the Athletic, would Quintana be on a Hall of Fame track if the Cubs had not ruined him for a 4-year period? And he took the question way more seriously than I anticipated, which was like, they were really worried about where his changeup was at, and they changed a lot of things to try to get him right. And I was like, yeah, you're right. They ruined him. He would be in Hall of Fame. You can just keep this going for another 10 years. I think he's with the starting pitcher qualifications to get consideration going, just good 10 more years of putting up a 3.5 ERA, 160, 170 innings a season. I think he's in a good spot. So delivery still looks the same, smooth as ever. So that and obviously now that they're going back to New York tied, I think it's a good spot for him to have a really, a chance for have a really meaningful start. Becomes kind of, as much as we loved watching him on the South Side, like he was, just a great guy to watch, just consistency and, the level of craft and command he brought. Like, there's not like a career defining start, especially not from the White Sox era for Jose Quintana. He's got a chance to be in the playoff mix. He had some really good starts with the Cubs in the playoffs, actually. I think the Nats series and DS in 2017, he had some great outings. But to see him get to shine on a national stage, I think that'd be really cool. The Phillies they're doomed until they, pick the obvious weapon, which is use Tanner Banks in high leverage. That's what he's built for. That's the stage is built for him. I don't know why they're not going for it, but maybe Rob Thompson will wake up at some point and use the Death Star that he has, Tan Ban in the biggest moment. But we'll see. Otherwise, I'd love to see all the former White Sox have a chance to put their name in big lights. Jose Ruiz, NLCS clinching save. Why not? Let's get wild this month.
By the way, Jim, while listening to that Effectively Wild podcast that James was on, Ben Lindenberg mentioned that Jose Ruiz finally picked up his first career save.
Yep.
At the last Sunday night game of the season. So that breaks his personal streak. It's the second longest streak of a reliever appearing in Major League Baseball without having a save. Ryan Webb, I believe, has the record for most appearances by a reliever without a save. And to fact check James, he is correct. Jose Quintana, the greatest Major League pitcher ever from Cuba, with his 30... Colombia, I'm sorry. His 30 career WAR for his entire career. Jose Quintana got the 30 WAR according to Baseball Reference. That is amazing. Beating out Julio Teheran by quite a bit. You could argue that Jose Quintana is the second best baseball player ever from Colombia, only trailing Edgar Renteria, which Renteria had quite the impressive career for 16 seasons, making 5 All-Star games. So pretty cool. I never thought of it until you mentioned it, James. But yeah, Jose Quintana, greatest Colombian pitcher in Major League Baseball history.
Yeah, I just pictured like Quintana pitching like 12 more years to get to 25 years of Major League service and getting to like 140 career wins. Hall of Famer is like, what do we do with this? Like he's, 60 wins should be clearly in, but like, are we going to really induct a guy with 140 wins, averaging 7 a season?
They there was the series in Texas in 2022. I think on alternating days, Pollock hit 10 years of service time and Kelly hit 10 years of service time. And one of them had cupcakes for it and the other one had a cookie cake. And so I'm wondering if Tana hits 25, what sort of absurd dessert to make him, or does the cake boss get involved, or does somebody have to come out of a cake? I want to see it happen now.
The other thing you mentioned, Ben Lindbergh, he has a fascination with guys who couldn't or weren't put in position to record saves or couldn't do it in the few chances they got. Matt Albers was the guy for years. Didn't record a save until after his White Sox career. Had 452 appearances. Some were spent as a starter, he had a year in Houston where he was mostly a starter, but otherwise 452 games through his first 10 years basically in the majors where he didn't record a save. So he used to be the guy, and then he had I think 7 over his last 3 years in the majors.
So in the National League, both series are tied 1 apiece. The Mets and the Padres, I guess you can call them the underdogs. They got a chance to clinch hosting the next 2 games 3 and 4. Over in the American League, Jim, we both predicted that the Kansas City Royals would beat the Baltimore Orioles. They did. The Orioles only scored 1 run in 2 games. I do not know what they're going to be talking about this upcoming offseason with Baltimore. I have to say this. I'm impressed with the way that franchise has built their roster. That is a very talented team. But after that series against Kansas City and watching those 2 games, I feel like they could be the next Toronto Blue Jays, in which we are asking ourselves 3 years from now, why wasn't this team better? Why didn't they win in the postseason? Because that Toronto Blue Jays team's on the edge of falling apart, very much like the White Sox, with some big decisions that they're going to have to make, especially surrounding Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and they may be in a rebuilding phase after so much hype about what they could possibly accomplish. So Baltimore, they pitched a lot better than I was expecting them to, but offensively, just only 1 run against Kansas City's pitching. Shocker. So in game 1, the Yankees, they score 6, but that's a back and forth game. The Royals played the Yankees very tough. They lose 6-5, but I feel like the Royals with game 2 on Monday here, They could have a chance like the Mets and Padres and put a serious scare into the Yankees if they can steal game 2, because just like the Dodgers, the Yankees have this great offense, Jim, but their starting pitching is shaky.
Yeah, big start for Carlos Rodon. While we're on the subject of former White Sox lefties, had a good year. He came out guns blazing, looked like it was going to be a total renaissance, and then was mostly okay. Picked up a lot of wins, pretty gaudy record, 16-9, but like just was decent, not great by standards, mostly healthy was the big thing. And like if you're getting a full season out of Rodon, like you're usually pretty happy or doing well enough, but did leave a little bit to be desired in terms of dominance. So I think his standing, given what he's being paid, given the financial pressures, with Juan Soto, and in terms of what the Yankees feel like the operating space they have, like, a bad start by Rodon here could, was it the WFAN or the tabloids going nuts in terms of, his worth to the enterprise. So like, I am fascinated by that. I will be watching him just to see what happens. Cole Reagan's like,
It's been fantastic.
Is a tough draw. Yeah, he's good. It's tough draw for him too. So like, if Reagan's pitches him, like, it could be fun for that. Like, Quintana is the underdog here in terms of the weird rib injury he had last year, and just the fact I think the Mets are getting the season they got from him feels like a miracle, whereas Rodon is somebody they paid big money for and expecting big things. And if Reagan's pitches him, like, you wouldn't think anything of it, but New York is a weird place. And so like, it could be a case of him being under the microscope a little bit.
I really enjoyed covering Carlos. Great guy. Wish him well. Hope he gets that big playoff successful start. And for my chair, there's already a big playoff start he had. Came up well short of what we needed. So go get him, big guy, but gonna be an empty feeling over here.
How do you feel about these American League series? Because the next time we record, gents, we'll be in the championship series for both the American and the National League. I had the Phillies and Padres. Jim had the Phillies and Dodgers. We didn't press you, James, for postseason predictions. We both had the Astros in the American League Championship Series, but they laid an egg against Detroit at home. That was a big surprise to me in the division series. But James, your thoughts about the American League with these two series? Who do you see advancing to the championship series?
I think Cleveland. The Tigers. They more seem an example of like the White Sox don't need a lot to return to like respectability. Like in terms of like, I mean, obviously they need a lot organizationally, but like you don't need multiple core hitters like hitting their ceiling necessarily. Like that, what do Kerry Carpenter was really good, but he wasn't necessarily healthy all year. But like, what do they have like the vision of what their lineup is supposed to be in place and like, in their prime? Because I like a lot of their offensive pieces, but I feel like a lot of them are like you saw them taking their rookie lumps. Like, what do they really have operating beyond like Riley Green? That's like, all right, this is like a really secure piece of our core in place, and he's hitting a stride, and this is the time to strike. And what do they have? Like, as much as they built their kind of rebuild around pitching, like Tariq Skubal is as good as you could have ever hoped him to be, but like Casey Mize didn't make the roster for this year. Matt Manning, I don't know what's going on with Matt Manning. Like a lot of the rotation places they put in place, are not there. There's a lot to be said for just playing good defense and like running the bases well and having like 2 or 3 good players and being in the 80 win territory and not being like a team that your fan base actively hates and is rooting against. I don't think that the Tigers like a serious like deep contender. And I think like I think Cleveland probably takes this series in 4 because that kind of accounts for Skubal a little bit. But I think they are a testament to like how much just playing competent baseball can get you decently far into October. Maybe not second or third week, but certainly past the first week. And I don't think it's necessarily the most justified position. Maybe other pitchers than Cole kind of pitch better. But I thought the Royals hung well with the Yankees. I don't think they're overmatched in that. I feel like they can provide kind of pesky at bats up and down the order. They got they got a healthy supply of 2024 White Sox. So if you have that, how can you go wrong? With Bobby Witt, I feel like they can make a lot of things happen when he gets on base that he didn't get on base at all. I think he went 0 for 5 in that game. They're still pretty competitive, but I think they could probably, especially when it gets to Kansas City, and if it's a really raucous atmosphere that's been in the past, and they're able to force a lot of the issue on the base pass and create chaos. I feel like it could be a fun series where they sneak out of it. So I think that'd be a fun situation to see that happen. I don't think there's an outcome where the Royals beat the Yankees and it's a boring series. So I think I'm kind of rooting for that on entertainment value, and I think that could happen.
Mass chaos. That would be something, Jim, for you living in New York. If Kansas City upsets the Yankees, but the Mets upset the Phillies, that would be an interesting scene in New York.
Yeah, I do miss being around Yankees fans and Mets fans. Like Nashville doesn't really have the, get some Braves fans, Reds fans, etc. But like there isn't really a predominant baseball interest here. People kind of watch the Sounds, and that's their baseball intake. Whereas when it was a big series, when there was disappointment, just a lot of actual literal water cooler talk about how bad the Yankees are, and how rough Yankees fans have it because they haven't won a World Series in 6 years, and they barely got to 90 wins, and just you're rolling my eyes at that like that. I love that, but the thing with the Yankees Royal Series that the Jazz Chisholm stolen base, that was pretty iffy and held up under review. Like, I wonder if that's like the kind of break that the Royals can't, they can absorb why every series has bad breaks, but in terms of like, if I can imagine the series going the distance and Royals fans looking back at that stolen base and being like, this is why I hate replay. And 15 years later, that stolen base is still brought up as something that decided the series, even though it was game one, and there are still a lot of games to play between two teams that should be competitive.
Yeah, so Monday night, American League, Tigers, Guardians, starting at 3:08 p.m. Central Time, 6:38 p.m. Central Time, Royals, Yankees. And then Tuesday is back to the National League. You got the Phillies and Mets. They'll kick it off before handing it off to the Dodgers and Padres. So I kind of like this, where it's going every other day. Except for Wednesday. Wednesday, there are 3 games scheduled for the postseason. Dodgers, Padres, Royals, Yankees, and then Tigers and Guardians. It'd be something, truly something, if it is an American League Championship Series between the Guardians and the Royals. Revisit the White Sox comments before the season and just how lucky they are to be in the American League Central.
That's why their record against the AL Central is my favorite fun fact, because they destroyed their own argument so thoroughly.
They sure did. They sure did. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening, and let us know in the comments section some of your fun facts of the 2024 season and what you're thinking about this postseason so far. Jim has been putting up a first pitch game thread on SoxMachine.com. So if you're looking for people to talk to and you don't want to be hanging out on Twitter during these postseason games, that's a place to go to chat with other White Sox fans on SoxMachine.com when the postseason games are ongoing. And we got postseason baseball all the way through. And the next time we record next week, it'll be the beginning of the championship series, both in the National and American Leagues. But if you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. You can also help support Sox Machine and gain full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and Major League Baseball by signing up at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where monthly plans start at $5. We do have discounts for annual subscriptions, and we also have additional tiers that you can also sign up for, including a couple spots open in our Veterans Committee, which you can join us in the group chat. So whatever off-season gossip that we hear, there's been a lot of gossip about the whole thing with the TV network and what the White Sox could possibly do at the managerial hiring. You can inquire at patreon.com/Sox Machine. to sign up. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.